Imagine checking into a hotel built for New York's elite. Iron balconies, carved wood, a lobby that feels like a private club. Then learning the same halls later saw suicides, a famous bedroom stabbing, police rides in the elevator at 3 a.m., and artists who swore the building answered when the lights went out. This is the Chelsea. I'm John. Now let's start at the moment this place was still supposed to be respectable. West 23rd Street, Manhattan. In the 1880s, the Chelsea wasn't marketed as a hotel with stories. It was pitched as a smarter kind of luxury, a cooperative building where wealthy New Yorkers could own elegant apartments in a new, modern structure. The iron balconies weren't just decoration, they were a statement. The building looked like money from the outside, and it was designed to keep that feeling inside. Early on, the promise was simple: privacy without chaos, a controlled address, a place where the right people could live near each other without living on top of each other. If you stood in the lobby back then, you wouldn't expect scandal. You'd expect calling cards, quiet footsteps, and rules that never needed to be spoken out loud. But the Chelsea had one trait baked into it from the beginning, and it's the trait that later made it dangerous. The building was built to hold a lot of separate lives under one roof without forcing them to mix. Long corridors, stacked rooms, doors that shut cleanly, balconies that let you watch the street without being on it. It's perfect if you want to be seen on your terms, and invisible the moment you're done being seen. Then New York changed around it. By the early 1900s, the city was speeding up. New money, new careers, new people arriving with no family name and no patience. And the Chelsea's identity shifted in a way that seems small on paper, but changes everything in real life. It converted into an apartment hotel. That single move altered the entire kind of person the building attracted. A rich cooperative says, "We know who belongs here." A hotel says, "Pay and you're in." Not for a night like a normal hotel either. The Chelsea became the kind of place where you could stay for weeks, months, sometimes longer, and nobody asked you to explain your life. That's the key. The Chelsea didn't just rent rooms. It rented freedom from questions. And that's when the building's elite feeling started getting a second meaning. Because if you're wealthy and respectable, privacy is comfort. If you're unstable, desperate, famous, hunted, addicted, or running from your own name, privacy is cover. The Chelsea quietly became a place where both types could exist at once. A well-dressed couple could pass through the lobby like it was a private club. An artist could drag a suitcase upstairs and vanish behind a door for days. A lover could show up in the middle of the night and no one would stop them. A fight could explode behind a wall and the hallway could look normal 10 seconds later. That's not a ghost story. That's architecture plus policy. By the time the Chelsea's reputation for artists really starts to grow, the building already has its most important rule in place: don't interfere. The staff learns how to see everything and officially notice nothing. The building learns how to absorb noise. And here's the part people miss when they only talk about bohemian legend. Chaos doesn't just happen. It gets managed. The Chelsea survived because it got good at containing incidents inside rooms, so the lobby could still feel polished. That's why the same address could host brilliance and disaster without collapsing immediately. The building functioned like a filter. It let people live on the edge, as long as the edge didn't spill into the front door. That business model creates a very specific kind of tension, Because the more the building protects privacy, the more it attracts people who need privacy for darker reasons. And once enough of those people stack up inside the same corridors, the question stops being, will something happen? It becomes, how many times can it happen before the hotel itself becomes the story? The Chelsea's first transformation, elite home to hotel, wasn't a tragedy. It was a strategy. But it opened the door for the second transformation, the one nobody advertises. A place that collects intense lives starts collecting intense endings. Not every rumor about the Chelsea is clean fact. Some stories get exaggerated because the building is famous. But enough deaths and scandals are documented, enough police reports and headlines exist that the pattern becomes hard to ignore. This hotel didn't just witness New York's messy side. It became one of the places New York sent its mess when it didn't want the mess seen. And the hotel learned to live with that, because the rooms stayed filled. By the mid-century, the Chelsea isn't just an address anymore. It's a magnet. Writers, musicians, actors, people arriving at their peak, and people arriving at the end of their rope. The same elevator carrying talent 1 hour and disaster the next. The same hallway that can feel glamorous at midnight and unsafe at 3 a.m. without changing a single piece of furniture. That's the setup you need before we talk about the specific nights that turn this place into a legend people still argue about. Once a place becomes known for privacy, it starts attracting people who treat privacy like oxygen. By the 1940s and 50s, the Chelsea isn't just a good address. It's a loophole. You can rent a room long-term, live like you're in your own world, and nobody forces you to perform normal life. That's why artists loved it, and why the hotel slowly trained itself to tolerate chaos without admitting it out loud. The system was simple. The lobby stayed polite. The incidents stayed upstairs. Staff learned the difference between noise and trouble. Noise was shouting, late-night arguments, a smashed glass. Trouble was police, blood, a body in the hallway. The whole survival trick was keeping trouble from reaching the front door. And then a man came to represent the hotel's most dangerous talent, turning problems into just another day. Stanley Bard. For decades, people described him like a mayor of the building. He knew everyone. He made deals. He could be charming, strict, protective, manipulative, sometimes all in one night. If you were the right kind of famous, the Chelsea didn't just give you a room. It gave you cover. If you were the wrong kind of inconvenient, it could freeze you out without a public fight. This is where the Chelsea stops being just architecture and becomes a machine. Rent didn't always mean money. Sometimes it meant a promise. Sometimes it meant a painting. That sounds romantic until you realize what it creates. A hotel that can't run on rules alone, because rules would empty the place. So it runs on judgment calls. Who gets tolerated? Who gets watched? Who gets protected? Who gets enabled? That's how a building collects deaths without looking like it's trying to. Because when you normalize extremes, addiction, isolation, obsession, collapse, you stop noticing the line where an intense life becomes an ending. The Chelsea's first famous death that really brands it in the public imagination isn't a murder. It's a slow, messy unraveling. In 1953, the poet Dylan Thomas stays at the Chelsea shortly before he dies in New York. People still argue details because legends attract fog, but the pattern is clear. A celebrated man, damaged by his own habits, dissolving in a place that doesn't ask questions fast enough to save him. That's The glamour trap of the Chelsea. The building makes suffering look like part of the art. A few years later, the same trap turns colder. In 1966, writer and poet Delmore Schwartz dies in the Chelsea after years of decline and isolation. The detail that sticks, the one that makes this hotel feel different from other famous addresses, is how long it took before anyone truly noticed. In a building full of creative people, a man can disappear in plain sight. That isn't just tragedy. That's the Chelsea's business model, showing its sharp edge. Privacy can become abandonment without anyone meaning it to. And once a hotel becomes known as the place where that can happen, it starts pulling in a very specific kind of person. Someone who wants to vanish, or someone who believes they can survive anything because the building will absorb it. By the late 60s, the Chelsea's reputation is no longer artists live there. It's anything can happen there. That's when the scandals stop feeling random and start feeling inevitable. A writer can destroy himself, and nobody interrupts until it's too late. A lover can scream behind a door for hours, and the hallway stays quiet. A famous face can stumble through the lobby at dawn, and nobody makes eye contact. The elevator becomes a device in the story. It carries glamour up, and sometimes it brings consequences down. The Chelsea is still elite in one sense. It's elite at secrecy. But secrecy has a price. Once the building gets used to holding things inside, it becomes the place people choose when they don't want the outside world involved. That includes the best nights and the worst nights. And this is the turn that matters. The Chelsea didn't become dark because it was cursed. It became dark because it was useful. Useful to the brilliant. Useful to the reckless. Useful to the broken. Useful to anyone who needed a room where the world wouldn't follow them in. Which is why, when the most infamous case hits the Chelsea, the hotel doesn't feel like a random backdrop. It feels like the one address in New York where a scandal like that could happen and immediately grow into a legend that never fully clears. The night that cemented the Chelsea's reputation didn't start with a scream. It started with the kind of quiet that makes a hotel feel expensive. Early morning, late 1978. The lobby is dim. The desk clerk is half asleep behind a ledger. The elevator is slow, as always. Upstairs, doors are shut. The building is doing what it was trained to do: hold people's lives behind wood and wallpaper. Then the call comes down. Not from a guest asking for towels. From a room where someone is saying, "Get help." And when staff reach the floor, they don't find a broken lamp or a drunk argument. They find a young woman on the bathroom floor, dead from a stabbing. Her name is Nancy Spungen. If you know the Chelsea's legend, you know what happens next. The police arrive, the hallway fills with uniforms, questions start, and instead of clarity, you get fog. The man in the room is Sid Vicious, famous, unstable, high, and bleeding from his own chaos. He says he doesn't remember. Then, he says different things. Then, he says nothing that matches cleanly. And here's why this moment becomes bigger than one crime scene. Because the Chelsea is the perfect place for a story with no clean edges. It's a building where people come and go at odd hours, where visitors don't always sign in, where neighbors hear shouting and learn not to call it in, where the staff's first instinct isn't make a scene, it's keep the lobby calm. So the same building that protected artists from the outside world now complicates the one thing the outside world demands after a death: a straight timeline. Was the door locked? Who was seen in the hall? Who heard what? Who went up the stairs? Who rode the elevator? In a strict hotel, you'd have answers. At the Chelsea, you have stories. Police treat it like any other case. Photos, interviews, evidence. The press treats it like a symbol. Sex, drugs, punk, New York rot. And the hotel gets caught in the middle, because no matter what it does, it loses something. If it cooperates loudly, it becomes the murder hotel. If it stays quiet, it becomes the cover-up hotel. So the Chelsea does what it has always done best. It absorbs the mess and tries to keep functioning. By afternoon, the lobby is calm again. Not because the building is innocent, but because the building is trained. Guests check in. Artists drift through. Someone laughs too loudly in the hall, like the world didn't just crack open a room upstairs. That contrast is what makes the Chelsea feel unreal. Death happens, and then the elevator opens again, like nothing happened. This is the point where the hotel's elite identity flips completely. It used to be elite because it was designed for wealth. Now it's elite because it can contain scandal. And scandal attracts more scandal. After the Spungen case, the Chelsea becomes a magnet in two directions at the same time. People who want the myth come looking for it. Writers, musicians, tourists who want to touch the edge. And people who are already living on that edge come because the building is famous for letting you live without questions. That's how a legend feeds itself. You see it in the pattern of the stories that pile up around the place. The brilliant who burn out. The famous who disappear behind a door for weeks. The addicts who treat the hotel like a safe house. The lovers who treat it like a bunker. And through it all, the same system keeps the building alive. The manager's judgment calls, the staff's silence, and the unspoken agreement that what happens upstairs stays upstairs as long as it doesn't spill onto the street. But here's the darker twist people miss. The Chelsea didn't fail because it was chaotic. Chaos became part of the business. A normal hotel sells comfort. The Chelsea sold permission. Permission to be broke and brilliant. Permission to be famous and falling apart. Permission to bring the wrong people through the side door. Permission to live a life that would look unacceptable anywhere else. And permission has consequences. Because once a building makes its name on "we won't interfere," it becomes a place where intervention arrives late, sometimes too late to matter. That's the thread connecting the slow tragedies, the isolations, the overdoses, the suicides, and the one headline murder everybody remembers. By the time New York starts talking seriously about cleaning up the Chelsea, the hotel isn't just an address anymore. It's a brand made of stories people can't stop repeating. And that's why the next phase gets ugly in a different way. Not blood and sirens, but lawsuits, renovations, evictions, and a city trying to turn a legendary mess into a luxury product without losing what made it legendary in the first place. After the Spungen case, the Chelsea didn't just gain a reputation. It got trapped in one. Because now the building carried two identities at the same time, and they fought each other every day. One identity was the Dream, a historic New York landmark, artists in the halls, fame in the elevators, a place where the city's creative life once lived behind one set of doors. The other identity was the Stain, bodies, sirens, scandals, and the feeling that the Chelsea didn't just witness collapse. It made collapse easier by letting people disappear inside it. And when you have a building like that, cleaning it up sounds simple until you try. New York real estate doesn't forgive romance. It forgives revenue. By the 2000s, the Chelsea wasn't just a legendary address. It was a war zone of money, history, and tenants who had been there so long they weren't just residents. They were part of the building's DNA. The hotel ran as a half hotel, half long-term home, which sounds charming until you realize what it means in practice. Nobody can fully control what the Chelsea is supposed to be. Then the cleanup era begins, and it's ugly in a way tourists never picture. Not knives, not overdoses, paperwork, ownership battles, renovation plans, lawyers walking through the lobby like they own the air. Tenants fighting to stay, not because they love the leaks and the noise, but because leaving means the Chelsea stops being the Chelsea. Once you remove the people who made it legendary, all you have is a building wearing someone else's costume. The first move is always the same. Sanitize the surface. Take the wild edges and make them look intentional. Replace chaos with curation. Turn the hotel into a luxury product that can charge luxury prices. You don't erase the legend by arguing with it. You drown it in marble, lighting, and new rules. And that's where the Chelsea proves it's different from a normal property. Because every time someone tries to reset it, the reset itself becomes another scandal. Construction drags on. Scaffolding turns the facade into a cage. The lobby atmosphere changes. Familiar faces disappear. The hotel becomes a battlefield between people who want to preserve the mess because the mess is the story, and people who want to remove the mess because the mess is the liability. Here's the twist that makes the Chelsea feel like it collects death, even when nobody's dying. When you try to clean a place like this, you don't erase darkness. You repackage it. The very thing investors want to remove, its reputation, becomes the thing tourists buy tickets for. Even if they never step inside, they want to stand across the street, point, and say, "That's where it happened." The Chelsea becomes a product not just of hospitality, but of memory. And memory doesn't care how fresh the paint is. So the hotel gets stuck in an impossible business problem. If you lean into the legend, you keep attracting chaos. If you erase the legend, you erase what makes people care. And the city watches this fight like it's entertainment, because it's New York. A building isn't just a building here, it's a character. When the Chelsea finally comes back polished and expensive, you can feel what they tried to do. The goal is obvious. Make it safe enough for luxury guests, controlled enough for the brand, clean enough for the headlines. But the Chelsea's past isn't the kind you can scrub off with renovation. You can remove the old furniture. You can rewrite policies. You can retrain staff to say, "No comment." You can lock down the halls, tighten access, install cameras, enforce quiet hours. What you can't do is stop people from walking in with the story already in their head. People still whisper in the lobby. People still ask about specific rooms, like they're asking about a crime scene. People still tell each other, it's not just haunted, it's heavy. Even if you don't believe in anything supernatural, you can understand what they mean. When enough endings happen in the same corridors, the building starts to feel like it remembers. And that's the Chelsea's final form, the one New York couldn't clean. It begins as elite housing for people with money and taste. It becomes a haven for artists because it sells privacy better than it sells comfort. Then it becomes a magnet for chaos because privacy without interference attracts people living on the edge. Then the edge starts producing consequences, deaths, scandals, a murder that brands the address forever. And finally, the city tries to polish it into luxury again, only to discover the stain is the reason the building is famous in the first place. That's why the Chelsea remains what it is, a legend you can renovate, but you can't erase. If you want the clean version of New York, you don't come here. You come here to touch the part of the city that never stays clean. Like the video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. I genuinely like seeing how far this community spreads. Different places, same obsession with the real stories behind famous buildings. If you watched the video to the end, would you ever spend a night in the Chelsea?